Hello everyone, welcome to night 4 of book 2 of the Orphan's Tales live reading series. I am back with you roasting in a winter shirt during the summertime, just for continuity over the course of these videos. And of course I'm so hot that my glasses are fogging up, so I have to clean them. I hope everyone's doing okay tonight. I'm sorry about Wednesday. We had some trouble with my phone, which for whatever reason, after 2 weeks of completely refusing to talk to the internet in any way, today it was like, I don't have a problem. Do you have a problem? I'm fine. I've always been able to hook up to the internet. There's definitely not been 2 weeks where I refused to do anything like a petulant teenager. If anybody has a problem here, it's you. So my phone's fine again. God knows why. Sorry, just leaning forward to grab the book. Yeah, so we will be doing Wednesday night this week. My phone better behave on the permanent and not just today decide that the internet is acceptable. I don't think the internet's any more acceptable today than it was yesterday, but it's none of my business. I hope that everyone has had a good 4th of July, such as it is, with a real sense of ennui about our nation's character, ennui at best, and all fireworks canceled. So good on all of us for that. We're listening to S.J. Tucker's awesome City of Marrow. She's on her second album based on the Orphan's Tales. The lipstick tonight is Revlon in Blackberry. It's a good one. I think I had forgotten it was a good one. Yeah, no, the phone, and of course, like, there's no Apple bar open or anything, so, or Genius bar, whatever they call it, so you can't get anything fixed. So I'm glad it decided to fix itself. Island's crawling with tourists, so that's awesome. Honestly, I've never been more trapped in my house than I am now, because it's literally not safe to go outside with all the people not wearing masks, so digging it all the way. Let me do all my intro nonsense while we wait for people to wander over from the various links. As always, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales, it is a play. You can find the music we're listening to and more music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can get copies of them, of the books, at any of your local independent booksellers' web portals. Mine, my local in Portland, Maine, is printbookstore.com if you would like to patronize them. Please do try to patronize your local bookstores, though, as they are having a really, really difficult time. And it won't recover nearly as quickly as some industries. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valenti. You can find me on Patreon at Cat Valenti and subscribe there. Today there is a long and angry rant about all of the accusations and allegations that rocked our community, as TMZ would put it, over the last couple of weeks. And lots of other goodies as well that are a little bit less upsetting. It is funny though. Part of it made Heath laugh so hard he actually threw up. So I at least managed to make it a little bit funny. Man, I think I used to do these every night and be able to just whip it right off my tongue, and now I've lost it. I've lost my patter. You can ask me questions after the reading is done, but try to think of them while I'm reading, because dead air sucks, and I usually just sign off if nobody has any questions. You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valenti Live on YouTube. I try to get those up in the first part of the week. These are a lot longer than the individual night ones, so it takes them a lot longer to process and upload. And if you are so moved, you can put a tip in the tip jar on my Instagram profile or my website, which is catherinemvalenti.com, or my YouTube profile. You don't have to. These are free readings, but times are super tight for us, and anything that you are moved to give would be deeply appreciated. And thank you so much to Matej, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and John, who dropped a coin in the witch's hat over the last week. Anyone who does, I will thank you by name on the next stream. You guys are my heroes. It's so appreciated, you can't possibly know. And I think that's it. Yeah. I don't know. Wish I had something deeper to say. I just feel like, boy, in the beginning of quarantine, we all had this sort of feeling like deep dread, but there was an energy to the dread, and now it's just been happening and happening and happening forever. It's still happening, and it's not going to stop happening, but half the country is pretending it's not happening. So those of us who live in reality, I think we're just being crushed under the weight of all of this, and there's no energy left. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who feels that, but I think probably not. So here's to all of us finding some more energy somewhere in the coming weeks. Tonight's story is gonna be dark again. As I've said a couple of times, I do promise that this book cheers up eventually. But the beginning of In the Cities of Coin and Spice was always meant to be, the dark heart of the book. No more sourdough fun. Yeah, everyone got past the sourdough phase and now we're just sour. So I didn't realize when I wrote this all those years ago in 2006 that I'd be trying to cheer people up in quarantine with it, so that maybe I shouldn't make it quite so dark. That was not on my radar, so I apologize for that. It's spooky. What can I say? It's the Halloween part. As I said a little bit in the last reading, this was a lot of me processing some of the things I experienced during the Iraq War and being in military life then, and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of personal processing in these early stories. So good times for all, cheerful fun and confetti everywhere. I think that we've managed to close out City of Marrow just on time there, so I will close this. Took an actual shower for you guys tonight. My hair is all freshly washed and everything to be on camera. And there goes my computer sliding right off. I think I gestured too frantically. I've said many times that you guys wouldn't believe how rickety this setup is. It looks all pretty, but it is being held together with bubble gum and a prayer. Let's get started. I have to moisten my throat a little bit. The Soldier's Tale continued. I really am sorry about this, guys. It just doesn't start happy. His skin came off in my hands. I never saw the king. I did not expect to. Yet a tiny part of me, the part which imagined him leading his troops with raven plumes blown black from a silver helmet, was disappointed. The king cloistered himself in his castle, it was said, surrounded on all sides by rivers, one white and one black. It sounded like a child's story, and in the days to come, I wondered if there had ever been a king, if we were not simply marching and fighting and digging and eating horrors of worm and centipede and mud to keep starvation at our backs. Because someone, somewhere, had once simply dreamed of a king with a golden crown. I am sure that someone, somewhere, has told that king's tale. I am sure it was grander than mine. I'm sure it was an important tale, full of history and pageantry, grave consequences for the whole countryside. I am just a soldier. I do not know those tales. At first I worried that I would be discovered, but after a few weeks in greasy mud and fog colder than the ice scrim on a pail of milk in the morning, one soldier looks much like another. I was never questioned. I was set a watch and given a wooden sword. The men laughed like a tree full of crows and said that I would have to earn a real one. In fact, I wore more or less my own clothes and kept my recruiter's helmet, though many tried to barter for it. The king, it seemed, felt iron and leather could best be used elsewhere. I was told to guard 12 barrels bounded in iron and not to look inside them. Simple. Yet all I remember now when I think on it is his skin, wet and loose, sloughing off between my fingers. We were encamped in the wide steppes, which through the ministrations of hundreds of soldiers had grown thick with their autumn crop, mud. It clung everywhere, hair, eyes, fingernails, knees, throat, nose. It smelled of leaves and mushrooms and dung and us, for we could no longer tell our own smells amid the mud. The barrels were stuck in slime, green climbing the wood. With my ridiculous toy sword, I stood before them, muscles corded with the care of cows and horses that had once been brothers, and peered into the night. A terrible tea was concocted from wheat seeds, caterpillars, and mud, and I drank it down at the end of every watch before feebly asking if I had not, through faithful duty, earned a real sword. One by one, soldiers, bearded and bare, bald and hairy, chuckled and told me that I could not have a real sword until I had killed someone. What was guard duty when no one threatened my guard? Yet we fought no battles, and I killed no one. Mold began to grow between the pommel and the grip of my plank sword. I waited. We all waited. My recruiter rethreaded his tassels in gold and went on to the next village. I asked after my brothers, but who could recall 2 boys now dead? I waited. We all waited. Once, only once, did I ask the only officer whose cloak still showed color what was in the barrels. He paled, and his mouth twitched as though he might vomit on my barely shod feet. It came from the king's man before you got here. Suffice it that I know and you do not. Be happy, and do not pray to trade lots. I was a good soldier. I guarded my barrels. It was half a year before anyone came looking for them, before his skin came off in my hands and I sucked in my last breath of clean air. It was very black at night, like the inside of a great dark heart. Snuffles and snores and the occasional weeping rattled through like mist and the mud, through the mist and the mud, the endless clammy damp. He came crawling like a centipede this way and that, his helmet cracked wide across the crown, his cheeks hollow under coarse stubble. He must have been hiding among us for days, waiting for my watch. The skinny soldier with the wooden sword. He lunged at my barrels. I caught him full on the chest, hacking at him with my stupid, useless stick. I slammed it into his eye a few times, and he grunted, groaned, our breathing fast and heavy as we grappled in the mud, our weight pressing us knee-deep into the sodden earth. He punched me hard in the stomach, but I did not let go, though the breath went out of me like a soul ripped free. We fell together into the barrels. I collapsed on top of him, and his sweating bulk cracked one of the vessels beneath him, grinding its shattered planks into the sludge. I scrambled up, and his skin came off in my hands. My father used to tell stories about people who lost their skins, selkies and lucrata and such like. Underneath, they are always something else, something beautiful, different, at least. A girl in a seal suit is wet and pale and shimmering under her gray, rubbery skin. But this was not like that. There was just blood and fat and sagging skin, and he melted in my arms, slipping away like a coat shrugged off in the summer. The smell was thick and acrid as burnt cat meat. A greenish-white paste oozed from the broken barrel. Pale steam already rose from it, curling and wafting, as though deciding which way to drift. It clawed the air before me, and before I knew it, I had breathed it in, long green trails of smoke filling up my chest, rubbing at my skin. Blisters rose before I could blink, fat and rippling on my arms. My eyes burned. Something seemed to burst in me like a tiny sun, and I stumbled away from the man without skin, away from the ruined barrels. My superior came running across the field of sleeping men, lugging water in 2 wooden buckets. He threw them onto the wreckage of bubbling flesh and pale, pasty sludge. Hissing and spitting, the slime vanished into the earth, leaving a ghost smoke floating over all those dreaming heads, smoke that would leave them scratching and weeping, but well enough in a day or 2. "Idiot," he mumbled, gently leading me to a thin little stream and dousing my head in the clear water. "It has to be diluted. It has to be mixed by someone who knows how. You don't just drop a person into it. You sure as sword rats don't breathe in the raw stuff." "The skin came off in my hands," I moaned, coughing harsh and sharp, trying not to rub at my blistered arms. He shook his head. Of course it did. We smothered him in the 5-league fog. The king's man sent it, that old horror in his collar and robes. It's to be used when we go into the mountains, when we take them for the crown, but cut it with water, you silly child. Cut and blown out fine as ash through bellows. You're lucky to still have skin on your bones and eyes in your skull. As the shallow morning light dripped over the hills like white oil, he helped me to wash in the river, and he did not even remark on it when he saw my bandaged breasts, my ruined, reddened hips. And that is how I learned what the word vesicant means. It means a thing which burns, which gets into you and raises up blisters like accusations. His skin came off in my hands, but my skin burned for years after, like a sentry torch. The tale of the golden ball continued. The soldier's hands shook around the edges of her shield. She extended her arms slowly, letting the bowl rest against her chest. Under the ancient guards, they were covered in the same old blisters, huge and bruise-colored, hardened into burls, snaking over her flesh like a ruby chain. I breathed too much of it, whatever it was. It was only meant to make enemies double over weeping, and I had enough to suffocate a leopard. As we climbed higher into the mountain passes, it became plain I was not going to recover. The blisters did not recede. I could not stop coughing. But as we began to fight real battles, as I finally came to have a sword of metal, it also became plain that I could not any longer be wounded. The blisters were good as diamond clothes. Nothing could cut me. We took a village on those steps, the screaming of the horses. We took a village, and a woman with her face tattooed like a demon spat 3 arrows into me without making a dent in my skin. I put my sword through her sister. Somewhere in the distance I saw a helmet with black plumes, and one of the cavalry said it was the king. I didn't believe him. After that, the men were spooked as horses in the side of a snake. Finally, it was decided before the rest descended into the valleys that I would be left behind. I would guard the pass. I would, should the chance happen by, requisition from the conquered all the ore I could to send below to the troops who were ever in need of arms. She licked her dry lips, her eyes darting between us like deers. I've been here a long time, years, maybe years. It's hard to tell in the dark. Sometimes I hear my brothers calling from the shafts, but I am not their sister anymore, and I cannot go down to them. The blisters are all of me. I float in their shell like a fog. I frowned. We own this mountain, but we do not dredge up ore for you. Excuse me. Or your wars. Widow laughed softly, full of regret, and pale as a pail of rainwater. She snatched up one of the other hedgehogs quicker than a cave-in, dredged him in his wheelbarrow of gold flake like a piece of meat through flour, flipped her shield over in her lap, and rolled him around the edge into the shape of a ball. From a spigot in the barrel, she drew a few greenish-white drops and smeared them into his fur, kept up her steady rolling around the hard bronze edge. Onto the stones of the upper shaft she rolled a perfect golden ball, and then she reached for me. The Huldre's tale continued. Cyriaco stopped, his little golden mouth snapping shut like a treasure house door. I sat in the now long shadows near the well, my mouth dry, my hands clasped in my lap. She rolled us all, in the 5-league fog and in our barrows. She was so much bigger than we and so much stronger than she seemed. For all I know, she still wanders in the passes. Now our skins are hard as hers, and we were used as hard as she. She sent us down the mountain into the valleys, and we served a king we had never heard of. His name was to us as milk to a cattleless land. The hedgehog glowered and picked at his quills. Did you know there was a war here, in this very place, such a long time ago? Don't be silly. There was. I was here. I fought. We were pressed into service as cannonballs. We learned new words, too. I was shot into the side of a bull elephant, and his blood swallowed me up. And after, when the fields were full of violets and blood-spattered balls, mothers began to take us home and give us to girls who were not as sweet as cream and honey, but clever as bees. There was a war. I'm a veteran. Does that make me sound brave to you? Does it make you like me? Perhaps a grown woman would have been more circumspect. You are a golden hedgehog all my own. How could I like you better than I do? His red eyes flared and dimmed in the late afternoon light. The grass seeds and dandelion dust had settled around him in a floating halo of white. That is fortunate, for I am going to marry you. That is what I am owed after all my loyal service. Even ordnance should come home to wife and biscuits. I have been your toy. I like you. Your hands have always made me blush. I've waited as long as I can until you were grown enough to smile on me. After all the amusement you have given me, after all the amusement I have given you, do you not think some recompense is due? This is what I demand, and this is what shall occur. I laughed from my belly. I laughed as only children without fear may. I like you, Cyriaco, but I am not going to marry you. Even if you were not a hedgehog and I were not a girl, I am only a child and very far off from fitting a wedding dress. I am the mountain, he growled. I am owed. I have not forgotten who I was before the war. I must be fitted to a princess, an innocent girl whose fingers have yet known no rings. It is the way of things, and I will not be denied just because I am not a pretty ruby crown or a bracelet of silver and sapphires. Hedgehog. I am not a princess. My parents are grain merchants. We eat well and dress well, but it's a pretty poor kind of royalty, even among the Huldra, princess of bread and beer. That is princess enough. I'm sorry, poor beast, I will not marry you. I had hardly spoken when they came. Gold and copper and silver and tin, ball after ball, rolling through the grass, iron pitted and pocked, quartz streaked in grime. They opened up into hedgehogs, their red eyes slitted and sharp, glaring at me from beneath furrowed and shining brows. I stepped backward as though a pail of water had been overturned at my feet. There are few enough of us who are left, rumbled Cyriaco in his yellow throat, but enough to keep you safe and still. Your parents will not miss you. They gave you a golden ball, after all. Most probably they expected you to go missing long ago, and are even now wondering why you did not just get on with it. I clenched my fists. I am not wicked, I insisted. Then why have they left you all alone, to amuse yourself with abandoned war relics? Why does no one call you in to dinner? Why does no one cry, "Oh, where has my pretty daughter gone?" I twisted my tail in my hands. I'm not a favorite. That doesn't mean I'm wicked. It certainly doesn't mean I shall do whatever my talking toy tells me to. Cyriaco growled, sound like clock hands scraping together. At this, the two hedgehogs nearest me, a cast-iron fellow and a sow of copper, leapt forward, drawing a handful of quills from their backs like young men drawing their swords. They each seized in cold, stubby hands the long ropes of my hair with a little roll and a little flip, and pinned my curls to the earth, driving their quills in like tent stakes. I tugged and wept, but could not pull free. Cyriaco raised his eyes to me, moist and scarlet. If I say I love you, will you soften? No, my own golden ball. I'm only a child. I will not be a wife. The other hedgehogs, smooth and ordered as a little army, began to tear into the earth as I struggled, pinned by their quills. They tore up strips of wet brown sod with bits of grass and yellow flowers still clinging to it and began to build. I shall build us a house, Oubliette. A house for living and loving and cooking and dying, and you will live in it whether you like it or no, cried Cyriaco, and he danced with a terrible joy while his family worked, their backs shimmering in the last of the sun. His golden feet tamped the soil, and the sod bricks grew around me. I shall be no one's ball again, he sang. Indeed, through the night they built up the house and closed me into it like a rafter. By dawn, only my eyes and mouth were left naked, and out of the cracks between the soft bricks flowed my trapped hair, and with more quills than I could count wrapped up in the dark strands and plunged deep into the field, each lovingly contributed by the hedgehog architects. From a distance, all anyone might see was a humble sod house, with bits of old tree bark showing through the walls. The sheaves of hair stretched from the house like an awning, and Cyriaco reclined in their shade. The other hedgehogs shrugged and rolled once more into gleaming balls. In the swelling morning they trundled off through the now bare field. I love you, said my golden ball. Put your hand to my head again, I will put a quill ring on it. We will be happy in the house I have made for you. I cried, quietly, my tears running muddily through the bricks. Please, please let me go home. So it went. You are home. You are the very substance of home. He asked to bend his quills into a ring every day, and every day I felt mud climbing my nose and refused. He was right, you know. No one came crying, "Oh, where's my pretty daughter gone?" No one looked for me. Perhaps a golden ball is nothing but a ball of yarn to lead difficult cats skipping away from their mothers. Perhaps I am wicked in some way I cannot guess. Some way which a hedgehog or a miller's boy can see, but a girl may not. Finally, Cyriaco left me during the evening, satisfied at last that I could not pull my hair free, nor escape his house. He rolled away and out of sight, burrowing into leaves and blossoms for warmth, leaving me to frost and hardening sod. I felt as though I, too, were bounded in blisters like diamonds. We have an illustration of her being built into the house here. I felt as though I too were bounded in blisters like diamonds, clapped up in a cold mountain. My tears froze on the fringes of grass sprouting from the walls when winter came. And when winter came, and the house was dusted with snow like a new grandmother's hair, my rescue came shambling into the field where I stood, my knees bent and burning. The tale of the 12 coins continued. Her breath had made the small space between us warm. "I don't think you're wicked," I said quietly, my voice filling the space as surely as a limb. "If I were not, someone would have come for me. In all that time," she reasoned, "if I were not, I would not have been given a golden ball and told to go off and play. I would have been kept close to the trunk of my mother's body and wrapped in her tail the way I wrapped my ball." She turned her head from me. "If I were not, the ghost would not have taken me." "But you've done nothing wrong. Your mother left you to the mercy of a ball. Mine left me to the mercy of the stars, but I did nothing wrong. We're not wicked, we're not." I curled my fingers into my palms. Oubliette only shook her head. "How did you escape, finally?" But she sealed up her mouth like a letter. Light sifted, flour thin through the shredded walls, and long gray fingers curled around her neck, around my waist. They pried us from our beds, plied us into clothes of paper threaded with dirty string, pleaded silently with us to eat what they had brought, handfuls of adventuring and garnet. We sucked them down. They were hard and chewy all at once. Our teeth split the skin, and they tasted like licorice, and beets. The same grasping fingers pulled us from our meager food and pushed us down that long corridor which led to the machine, to the mint. The workday had begun. I tried to keep close to her, but it was impossible in the press of so many children. I could not see where she went, the one head floating shorn and strange among the others. Little voices rose and fell, paper trousers rustled. It was a little like school, save that we were all so afraid, so afraid. The praeta did not speak to us, but placed our hands where they wanted them, pushed our fingers as they meant us to move. I was stationed at the edge of the great arching thing. Already it hummed with moving bodies, lurched and swayed as though it were itself alive. It was Vumim herself, to my surprise, who cradled my arms in hers. Her blue-white hair brushed my face as together we reached for the shroud-covered baskets. Her diamond belly pressed against my back as we drew back the shrouds, and her wheat-stalk arms caught me as I fell away from the thing she meant me to haul up out of the straw. For under the colorless gauze were the tangled limbs of children, glass-pupiled and sightless, gaping at nothing. "It was better for you," she wheezed, wretched and worrying. "I told you it was. To work and not be minted. You make money out of us." I felt as though I might vomit, but kept the hard, chewy gems down. Vumim's eyes creased with embarrassment. "We didn't notice," she said. "When we wasted to nothing, we didn't notice for a long time. Our markets were so busy. We could not cease trade because of a few ruined districts. Or even more than a few. Our economy kept our heads to the ground, and even after we kept up our markets, oblivious. We only truly saw what had happened when gold and silver no longer shone for us, no longer warmed the fingers with its very touch. She cringed away from me, as though I stood in a place to judge her. It meant nothing to us. Our jewels had no taste, our coin no weight. What does a ghost treasure? That which lives, that which is hot and hard. There is nothing more valuable than bodies, and we trade now in bone. We trade in it and mine it from the unwanted. We mine it and mint it, and it goes to the new Assad, where you first enter the city, and it buys pale shadows of what we used to love, apple cores and broken stone and skin with no meat, glistening and thick. It is called Deheba, this new money, and we prize it as we once prized silver, as we once prized the taste of topaz. I am sorry, but all things flow to the Assad, and so must you, the living, work. I stared at the child whose arm flopped out of the basket, white and cold. It was a boy with yellow hair and green eyes. His neck was bruised as though he had been seized by long, inexorable fingers which squeezed and squeezed. See, said Fumim, we spare you this task at least. I considered struggling and running from her, but she was surely stronger than I and faster. She moved her arms along mine again, sinuous and silken, and gently lifted them to grip the boy by the torso. Provided the strength this first time to heave him onto the machine where other children longer employed than I duly dragged him along to shining blades which quartered him, eighth'd him, and further. The meat was cleaned from the precious bone somewhere in the belly of the mint, far down the machine. Round coins then emerged, stamped with the spider sigil, clean and white. I worked for hours with Fumim guiding my every gesture like some grotesque pantomime. I stopped looking at them, all these boys and girls. I just closed my eyes and reached into the baskets, closed my hands automatically. I could not look. I could not. Finally, a horn sounded from somewhere far off, and we were ushered away from the great hall and toward a trough brimming with sapphires. I shoved them into my mouth, as I once had brown beans. They tasted like pastry and milky tea. The diet of jewels had begun to disturb my stomach, truth be told, and I wished fervently for bread. The Praita watched us eat, as they had before, and stroked their necks obscenely. They led us without sound back to the barrack beds, and I understood as my arms ached under the thin blanket that this day was now every day of my life. I wept into the pillow, trying not to feel the heft of thin arms and legs still in my hands. Oubliette climbed in beside me, shaking, her eyes wide as a wolf's, her teeth chattering. I held her so close to me I thought I might break her, but she clutched me with as much desperate strength, as much hopeless terror. We spoke in quick-fire shots, like arrows loosed one after the other, breaking each shaft before it in mid-flight. Did you see? Yes. Did you have to? Yes. Did you do it? I had to. Did you? Yes. Did you throw up? No, but I wanted to. Did they tell you? No. I told her all Fumim had told me, and her tears were hot as boiled water on my hands. We shuddered together in the dark. Neither of us spoke for long moments, stretching out like wool around a spindle. At last, because I could think of nothing else to comfort either of us, I murmured against her bristly scalp, "Tell me the rest." She began to talk to me, her voice dim and hushed as rain against a broken fence. The Huldra's tale continued. It sidled, did my rescue. It appeared under the hoofprint moon, washed in white, the distant grass brushing its knees. My rescue approached hesitantly. It sniffed the air, stuck out its tongue once or twice to taste it. It took a few steps, then stopped to watch me, then a few steps more. The moon was very high by the time it came near enough for our eyes to connect like copper key and copper lock. My frozen tears shattered as I smiled. It was a unicorn. I have heard that unicorns are pale and perfect, all white and silver like a bride's veil. Those are silly tales, told by sillier uncles and grandfathers. They are dark as racehorses, brown and jet, with the tails of lions and a boar's cloven hooves. Their little black beards hang from their chins like unchewed grass, and their horns are not pearl and gold, but twisted bone, stuff of antlers, twisted round in yellow and red and black. Those horns are thick as my own arm, and sharp as shears, but the horn of this unicorn was severed a little above the base, and the stump had bled, scabbed over, and bled again. It was a mass of hardened, blackened blood, and only hints of horn gleamed through. The mutilated beast sidled closer to me, and though she drew back, much as a wild horse, fearing that the hand that holds the apple has a mate which conceals a bridle, she nuzzled my neck and cheek with her nose, soft as a mule's. "I smelled you," she said. A unicorn's voice is a low, liquid thing like pomegranate wine. "I wonder you could smell anything buried in sod," I laughed. "The unicorn is fearful to see, but it is not a hedgehog." My heart was lighter for that. "I smelled your innocence, like baking bread. It called me over the wood and the field. I am wicked, not innocent. Do not tell me my business. Innocence is a technical thing. I do not care what menial vices you think you have committed. I misjudged purity once, so you ought to believe I am careful enough these days." "Can nothing be done?" I asked shyly, trying not to look at her ruined forehead. "Like innocence, a horn once squandered cannot be regained." I tried to shift my weight inside the house of sod, for my legs were stiff and heavy. Often in those days I wondered if I would grow in this hunched position and become a bent back long before I became the kind of crone who ought to have one. The unicorn moved her dark eyes over me. "You are in pain," she said distractedly. "Yes, I'm afraid you cannot lay your head in my lap." Her nose wrinkled. "I do not want to. Why should I want to lay my head in a child's lap? I am too old for such games." Her eyes slitted in anger, and could I have run, I would have, for her snorting and pawing were awful to see. "I'm sorry. I ought not to believe in dusty old tales. Enough are told about my kind that I ought to know better." She calmed somewhat and moved nearer to me again. I looked up at her through my pinioned hair. "But I am in pain, unicorn. And should you help free me, if perhaps your head were to fall in sleepiness, no more, into my lap, who would blame either of us?" She gnashed her yellow teeth a little. "If I free you, you will only run away, and I will have to chase you, and then I will be sleepy indeed." "I will not run." "You will. You do not like me. You only want to use my teeth and my horn and such for your own ends. That's how you all are. I am nothing but a shop to you, where you may reach onto the shelf and take anything you like." "Then tell me a true tale. Tell me how you lost your horn, and keep me company, if I am innocent enough to pull you over the fields like a plowshare." And we will pick up with the unicorn's tale, which is called A Tale of Harm. Just, to make sure it'll be cheerful, on Wednesday night. Everybody take a deep breath. I know that was a little brutal. Sorry. Again, I was unaware that I would be using these to cheer anyone up a couple decades down the line. Whoops. Does anybody have any questions? Trying to think of, I definitely remember wanting to put a unicorn in it at some point, but I won't talk too much about the unicorn till next week. It's the thing about horror. It is awful, but it sticks in your mind. And fairy tales very much are horror. There's tons of body horror in fairy tales, and various body parts being made into various things. Some of you may know that one of the original Italian versions of Little Red Riding Hood involves Little Red Riding Hood eating her grandmother. The wolf talks her into eating her grandmother's hair and her teeth and her eyes, and it's just completely horrible. And you do wonder how thick Red Riding Hood really is, because the wolf tells her that the teeth are rice, uncooked rice, and like, come on, man. Nobody's fooled by that, but Old Red certainly is, and it's a long tradition of completely disgusting body parts being used for things they're not for in fairy tales. So this is of a kind, not doing something radically different than the tradition. Have I ever met a pet hedgehog? Yes, I met one at ReaderCon. One of the women on the con committee has a pet hedgehog that she brings every time. It tried to make a nest in my hair. Yeah, and it is wine tonight. It was there. It's not a very good wine. It's the cheap stuff from the shop, but it'll do. And it is wonderful to meet here, even if the stories are dark. They will get less dark, not next week, but soon they will get less dark. I don't remember anything about my unicorn other than the sort of base of the story, which is an etymological base. I like etymology, the meanings of words, the histories of words, and so that is something that often inspires a story, and that's what this is. Deb says, I'm finding this cathartic. It's not reassuring, no, but in a way we kind of need this, like things are dark and this is letting pain out. I'm pretty comfortable with this as a metaphor for capitalism, honestly. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and I'm fine with it as a depiction of what unfettered capitalism does to us. And we do get to the phoenix and his girl eventually. There are good and beautiful things coming. And they're just kind of bad and beautiful right now. But I do love Seven and Oubliette, and they are lovely characters, and it'll come out okay in the end. Spoiler. But yeah. Well, I'll do my outro stuff. If anyone has any questions, you can pop them up. As always, for legal reasons, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales in the Cities of Coin and Spice. It has been a play, a one-woman show. You can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of them at any of your local independent bookstores' web portals. If you would like to patronize my local independent bookstore, it is printbookstore.com. You can find me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. You can find me on Patreon and subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti as well. There's a brand new giant essay about sort of the state of science fiction right now. And you can catch up in the archive at Kat Valenti Live. And if you are so moved, you can put toss a coin to your witch, and put a tip in the tip jar on my Instagram profile or my website, which is katherinemvalenti.com. Or my YouTube profile. You don't have to. These are entirely free. But lockdown is still happening, believe it or not. Some people would have you believe it isn't, but it is. And times are very tight for us. So if you are moved to give anything, please do drop a coin in there. And I will see you all on Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we will meet a unicorn, you and I together. I really love these times with you guys, and I know that I will look back on it when all of this is over as one of the beautiful parts. Much like these stories, everything is dark, but there are the beautiful parts, and you guys are one of my beautiful parts. So I will see you all on Wednesday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Good night.